Welcome to the Future of Supply Chain, presented by Dynamo. Each episode, we sit down with leaders in the industry as we build the future of supply chain together. Let's get into the show. Here's our host, Santosh Sankar.
Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back to the Future Supply Chain Podcast. I'm your host, Santosh Sankar. Joining me today is Michael Grace, VP of Customer Risk Management at Highway. Welcome, Michael. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So we're going to talk about all things freight fraud today. But before we jump in, I'd love to just level set some of the knowledge amongst our listeners and ask you for a kind of quick 90-second overview of Highway and what you and the team are working on there.
Yeah, so Highway, Highway is carrier identity. So we are a service provider for freight brokers and 3PLs. Highway identifies who's really hauling your freight to reduce fraud and really supercharge your digital load booking.
And what's the Michael Grace story? How did you kind of get into the world of freight fraud, or might I say freight fraud prevention?
Yeah, so prior to coming to Highway about a year ago, I'd been in the freight brokerage space for about 15 years. The last 8.5 years was, at a top 15 broker here in Atlanta, and I was their VP of Risk Management and Compliance. So primarily handled, shipper contracts, cargo claims, carrier compliance, things like that. And towards the end of my tenure at my previous employer, starting around November 2022 is when you just saw, something that we've never really experienced before, is just fraud like you've never seen, right? Like we back in the day before fraud was so bad, the worst thing you really had to worry about was, a double brokered load or a contract scam, or double paying loads on double brokering shipments. You occasionally might have like a straight theft, out of a non-secured lot, or maybe carriers involved. But you never really had the strategic theft and fraud like we saw at the end of COVID. And after everybody bought their new boats, their she sheds for COVID, all their flat screen TVs, stuff for their house. Inventories were at an all-time high, right? People weren't buying more things, so rates dropped. Carriers were going out of business, and all these, freight brokerages and third-party dispatchers that had built up during the COVID, year and a half, 2 years, all that infrastructure was still there. So the once previous employer that maybe got laid off still knows how to log in, still knows how to post a load to a load board, still knows how to really do all the back end of freight brokerage. So we had, a perfect environment for these bad actors to come out and really take advantage of their knowledge of how the industry worked. They know what freight brokers are operating. They know where they're posting loads, and they know how to convince somebody to, take a load from them. So he kind of created this environment for the bad guys to thrive in, and that's kind of where we've left off. And freight fraud's not going anywhere. There's always the demand for cheap goods is not going to go anywhere, and that demand is through the roof. And I don't think we're ever going to see really like a decrease in freight fraud. It's just how do you manage it properly and not let it affect your business. And that's why people use Highway.
You alluded to that freight fraud isn't something new. It had existed. It had been perhaps a bit more latent, less frequent. And it sounds like one of the repercussions of kind of the COVID heydays, where there's that massive bullwhip effect, is there are a whole lot of people that got into our world, understood how our world worked, as they kind of left the industry, whether on their own will or because there had to be kind of a reconciliation effort as people realize volumes and rates aren't going the right direction to support this size of an organization. They use their knowledge to start facilitating kind of in part illicit activities to some extent. Is that kind of what we're seeing now as we kind of see freight fraud spike as kind of data comes out quarter after quarter? Or is there some other reason perhaps behind it?
Yeah, it's exactly what we just talked about, and it's organized international cyber criminals that they don't have to be right next to the cargo when it gets stolen. They can be in Pakistan or India or Moldova or Uzbekistan. They can be one of those foreign countries that that have a lot of legitimate third-party dispatchers or back office support for legit motor carriers here in the U.S. So it's just hard to really distinguish who's legit, who's not legit, when there are so many different people overseas, working with the truckers that we have on our highway.
What are the most common types of fraud that highway sees today? And are there any that are kind of most surprising to you or your customers when it goes down?
I mean, the identity theft, there's a lot of different levels of strategic theft. So strategic theft is just when they're using fraud and deceptive information intended to trick brokers, carriers, and shippers to basically give the load to thieves instead of the legitimate motor carriers. So they're using identity theft, right? They want to use someone else's reputation, someone else's identity, so they don't have to, use it themselves, right? So they're going to spoof an email. They're going to spoof a phone number, and they are going to continuously attack with fake phone numbers and fake emails throughout the day. We see that as the number one continuous attack vector is straight identity theft because it's so easy, it's free, and they're successful with it almost every day. But we get probably 50 to 80 identity theft cases probably submitted a day. And that's just a fake email or a fake phone number that somebody has emailed one of our customers to try to take a load, or they've told them over the phone and they've tried to, take a load from a load board that where the broker has their shipment posted. That's something that's never going to go away because it's, low-hanging fruit for these guys. But they are getting, smarter and more creative. So obviously you have ID theft, but they're also doing, fictitious pickup scams, fraudulent carriers. So they'll paper up a carrier to look legitimate. They'll get insurance. They'll lease a truck, but really they're just, casing the neighborhood for a couple of years, and they'll break bad. We've seen lately criminals just hijacking legitimate carriers' emails. So you'll see a lot of compromised emails of legitimate carriers where the legitimate carrier didn't have, 2FA set up on their Gmail or their Yahoo, and they get a fake phishing link that looks to be legitimate from maybe an onboarding provider or a broker's private load board. They click on that link, they put in their credentials. Guy will call them and say, hey, I need, you're almost done with the setup, but to push you through, I need you to read off the verification code from your phone. And the verification code that they read off is literally like their Yahoo or Gmail that was initiated by the bad guy. So it's really important, like that, motor carriers really learn how to protect their digital and email hygiene and put the 2FA on. Don't share verification codes because these guys, prey on people not knowing what's going on, right?
That's right.
And then, these carriers fall victim to it, and it drags their reputation through the trash. They have to prove that they weren't actually involved. And it's tough. It's tough for the small guy that was just trying to take a load, and he didn't know he was calling in on a DAT posting that was posted from hijacked credentials up from a broker. So it's you just never know. That's I think we'll talk about highway procurers later on, but that's why we made highway for carriers.
Yeah.
We have highway for brokers. We really only cater to freight brokers, but highway for carriers we launched to help carriers vet their brokers on who are the legitimate contacts at this freight broker,
Yeah.
what are their phone numbers, what are their emails, what's their credit score. Like, I want to know I'm taking a load from a legitimate broker. And it also gives the carrier a chance to leave reviews on the broker. Say they don't pay their invoice in 30 days, or maybe they're part of some fraud that we don't have visibility on, but the carrier does. Maybe they're a victim of identity theft, and they can report that to the other carriers so that they don't get spoofed by someone pretending to be this broker. So we
Sure.
launched that a few weeks ago, and if you're set up with Highway as a motor carrier, we don't charge carriers anything for this. You log in, you're able to view, search all freight brokers with an MC, and then you're also able to kind of self-serve your own account. So if you need to, add users, remove users, if you need to update your COI, ELD information, all of that there is there in the Highway for Carriers.
Leaning into that a little bit, it sounds like with the new launch of the carrier facing product you just mentioned, a carrier being able to better understand and vet the broker or brokers they do business with allows them to perhaps prevent kind of a spoof that oftentimes happens when you're an intermediary, right? And transportation,
Exactly.
there's
Exactly.
such a high volume of brokered loads these
It's
days.
it's always it's always a two-sided spoof, right? The bad guy is going to be impersonating a motor carrier to
Yeah,
a broker and a broker to a motor carrier. So
yeah,
if we can cut off the head of the snake on one of those or both of them, like they're going to have they're going to have a smaller service area to work with, and a smaller chance of being successful with some of these identity theft situations.
yeah. And so, kind of going to the real cost of fraud, whether you're a broker or a shipper, right? The obvious one is the lost load or the compromised freight. But what else kind of is there when you look at kind of the expenses or the toll such an incident kind of takes on these two constituents?
Oh yeah, I mean, when a load gets stolen, it's not like that customer is going to want to tender you a bunch of new loads, right? They're gonna probably stop what they're doing. They're gonna review your process. They're gonna see, is this a one-time incident or has this happened a couple times? So loss of business is obviously the number one concern. Um, you know, uh, AR from that customer, if they owe you a lot of money and you have open claims, brokers agree to a lot of one-way indemnity obligations and a lot of these shipper contracts that they agree to. And in most of these contracts, shippers have the right to just offset the broker's payables for claims. So the AR thing is a big deal. Next to that is insurance. Insurance, cargo theft isn't even like covered these days on most policies unless you're paying more for it, because the insurers have seen it's been just a bloodbath for them the last 2 years with all these losses. You're either going to have a fraud sublimit or a theft sublimit, or a really high deductible for theft incidents, or it's just not going to be covered at all. And if you have a bunch of theft claims, that your insurance is either going to cancel you or just, make that deductible a $75,000 deductible that was once a $5,000 deductible 3 years ago. So you're going to feel pain with insurance either way. And I would say, minus the reputational losses, the bad AR, employee turnover, you can even mix that in there too. Because if I'm a freight agent and or a broker and I have a good relationship with this broker or this shipper, I might just go to a different broker and start fresh and let the old broker clean up the mess. So you have, employee turnover mixed in there too.
Mm. And how does a customer quantify the ROI of subscribing to Highway? You mentioned that as a carrier, you can subscribe and join Highway free of charge. It provides them some of those protections. But for like brokerage customers using your brokerage product, perhaps a very vulnerable part of kind of the value chain in transportation, how should they think about, hey, the benefits relative to the costs of securing themselves or having some peace of mind because of Highway being in the loop?
Yeah, no, if people haven't, I talk to customers and prospects all day, but if, somebody's still on the fence on deciding if they want to, move forward with a Highway Connect program, I just have them send me your last 6 months worth of losses and the dates. And I'll do an ROI report for them and I would show them which products that we have available would have stopped or stopped that stuff from happening. And
Mm.
then, we give that back to them. We can show them, it pays for itself, 2 loads. Could have been stopped by using our plugin, or hey, we could have routed this fraudulent phone number out of your network if you're using Highway for VoIP, or hey, we would have given you an out of range alert on this load because the carrier had no trucks in the area and you're a low bot customer. So we've got a lot of different products to try to solve most of these vectors, and as we see new vectors, create new products. So we're always thinking ahead and
Vigilant.
yeah, and doing what we can to plug the holes, right?
Is there a success story you all are most proud of at this point, where Highway's been kind of a key enabler in preventing or reducing the amount of such activities?
I think the success story is just all of our customers can really speak to it. I don't know how you can run a freight brokerage and mitigate risk without using Highway. We have,
Mm.
um, all our customers are awesome. They probably have about 1,000 customers. 80 of the top 100 freight brokers use us, and they use us for a reason because the data is there. We're shining light on things that haven't been shined on before, and the product actually works. And you've seen freight brokers' losses have decreased, almost every single time when they moved over to Highway from their previous providers. So I think just our customer base kind of speaks for itself.
And I'd love to kind of get into the sausage making briefly, if you would, as to kind of how Highway practically works. Because the questions that have been posed to me are like, is this a data problem? Is it a trust problem? Is it a network and kind of partner design problem? How does kind of Highway reconcile this and practically kind of facilitate a reduction in freight fraud incidents for its customers?
Yeah, so that's our Highway's identity engine, right? And the three things that we're really asking ourselves or asking the carrier is, who are you? Do you really have the authority to represent the carrier that you claim to
Mhm.
be? And what equipment do you actually have? And these questions are answered, using our identity engine. And basically, you know, after clicking on sign in with Highway, the user is going to authenticate themselves, and they're going to authorize every user that onboards. And we're going to capture basically the bad actors, um, all their location data, what kind of photo they're using. We get all that data, and we've got some trapdoors in the back, to you know if they're using certain, I don't want to give away our secret sauce, but if there's characteristics of bad actors, we put them in a different bucket, and we only let
Sure.
the good ones that have the authorization and that have been authenticated into our network. So really, and we're also doing, identity verification, the selfie with the driver's license as part of our identity engine now. But that's how we know who we're really talking to and where they're sitting and what kind of trucks they have, is through the identity engine.
And how does this compare to kind of other onboarding tools, identity management tools? Because I was actually randomly added a couple weeks ago to this really long LinkedIn message that had probably 50 people, and it was a small owner operator who had been blacklisted on another separate platform, and it was kind of his cry for help as to, hey, like, I'm not able to move freight as one of my largest customers, but I've been blacklisted without reason. I am who I claim I am. I am running a legitimate operation, and that kind of led me to believe, hey, like, there's some alternative approaches away from highway that may not actually be working because they're kind of creating some false positives, and you're impacting the livelihood of somebody, right? And really kind of the livelihood of the people that are the backbone of the U.S. economy.
Yeah, like, we're not going to just let anybody post whatever they want on a carrier. Like, we're just not. We're here to protect against fraud. If you have a service failure, if you want to argue about a truck would or not use, do that somewhere else. But what sets us apart, we're just obsessed with the truth, and we use objective data to give you kind of trustless methods for identifying who to trust with your freight, and that's what we care about. We care about protecting the freight and fraud prevention and the truth. So if someone misspoke and put something untrue on a carrier, we're going to correct that to make sure that their business isn't affected negatively.
And we've discussed carriers, we've discussed brokers, we haven't discussed shippers. But are there things that shippers should be mindful of or aware of as they, from their vantage point, are trying to combat freight fraud?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at a couple theft incidents that occurred recently, and you'd be surprised how many shippers will load a driver with an expired CDL or somebody with a first name, no name given. It's crazy to me. And then the fact that shippers will take pictures of a truck that has license plates zip tied on the front and on the tractor and the trailer, and that's not a good sign. Don't ever load a truck that has zip ties holding a license plate on, please. Just don't. It's going to get stolen, I promise you. I've also seen tape over half the trailer numbers. The tape that printed out, carrier name, MC DOT number over the old one, that people use magnets all the time. Have mailbox numbers for the truck number. If it looks weird and somebody just altered this right before they got there, it's because someone just altered this stuff right before they got there, and they're covering something up. So know who you're loading, check their driver's license, make sure they don't have zip tied license plates on, and work with your brokers. Only load the carrier name, person, truck number that your broker tells you. Verify the VIN number that the broker tells you is going to show up. Right? Do all these things to make sure you know who actually was loaded that day. In case it does go missing, you can give the police an accurate description of the vehicle, the person, and the driver's cell phone that picked it up. You need all of those things, because when something bad happens, you have to rely on the shipper to help you find out who was actually loaded. So
Yeah.
the more details the shippers have, the more thorough they are checking in these drivers and verifying these trucks or the trucks that are supposed to be on site. It goes a long way.
Um, it's interesting you kind of point out attributes to the quality of the asset that rolls up. Is it taken care of? Is it clean? For lack of a better word, does it look janky or not janky, right? And it takes me back to a conversation I had probably nearly 10 years ago now with the team up in Cookville at Averett. And one of the leaders was telling me that their founder, Gary Sasser, hated to see a truck that was dirty, that did not look well kept. And he would oftentimes kind of berate his team to make sure that that asset, that particular vehicle, went to the truck wash. And after a few times, somebody asked, like, why are you so insistent on this? He was like, well, one, like, I have pride as kind of this being my company. But he goes, what will our customers think? We need to prove to them we're buttoned up. We run a smart, sharp operation. And the way our assets show up when we pull up to take a load is a major statement on that. And that kind of comes full circle based on what you've just articulated that shippers need to pay attention to. So
Yeah, 100%. No, I've heard that same story from Avery, and it is true. They do have the cleanest trucks on the road to this day.
Sharp.
And no, it's really true. It's like don't load a carrier that hasn't washed his truck in 2 years and has got handprints where all the markings are supposed to be. It's he's there because that truck is probably not his, right?
Mm-hmm.
So know your carrier, know who you're loading, and if you have a funny feeling, just turn them away. You don't have to load them.
So you recently launched the Freight Fraud Index. Let's delve into that a bit. What should people know from kind of this first report? What do you hope it kind of does for the broader industry as you continue to publish those?
Yeah, we're just trying to highlight the new vectors that we see because they're changing. Sometimes these guys use a hybrid combination of a few different things. Sometimes they go back to the plain old identity theft. But what we're seeing is, we saw this is based off CargoNet numbers, but a 27% increase from this year to last year in fraud attempts. Before that, I think it was 2022 to 2024, Q1 2022 to Q4 2024, there was a 1,400% increase in strategic cargo theft, which is insane, right? And now we've seen an additional 27% just between this year and last. So it's not going anywhere. It's just going to continue to get worse. So we're just trying to highlight the methods that are being used so we can educate our brokers on how to protect themselves. So the top vectors that we're seeing, like I mentioned earlier, identity theft, that's never going to stop. Change in ownership. We're seeing a lot of carriers, buying MCs online. There's websites, there's Facebook groups, there's Reddit posts on MC for sale. A lot of these carriers are just trying to get out of the business and think they can, sell their MC online, no questions asked, and they can easily sell it online. There's these platforms that look legitimate. They're not really legitimate, but unfortunately, like if you have a lot of broker carrier agreements, you've been in business for a while, you have an Amazon account, all makes your stock price go up. If you have a clean safety record, that also makes your stock price go up. Then these guys sell it. The bad guy will purchase their MC. Usually the email and the phone will come with the purchase, and then they'll, basically pretend to be the old owner and take a bunch of loads that will never be seen again. So we're seeing a lot of change in ownership, thefts recently. The compromised email inbox, that's the probably the biggest one that we're seeing is people being victimized by the compromised phishing links. Phone spoofing is another one. So, these guys know how to use programs that will can alter the caller ID and name when somebody calls. So if I'm calling in Michael Grace Trucking, I can type that in and it will show up on the caller ID. And if the person at the other end of the phone just takes an inbound call and assumes that number is, accurate, they could fall victim to, that spear phishing attack. So we always encourage everybody to use our Highway for VoIP, which can detect spoof numbers and basically uses our database of reported fraudulent numbers, and we will route any fraudulent numbers out of the broker's VoIP phone network for them before the bad guy has a chance to, get carrier sales on the horn.
Sure. Well, with that, Michael, appreciate you indulging us here on all things freight fraud, and also kind of better understanding how Highway helps its customers work through this risk that, to your point, isn't going to go away anytime soon. It's just kind of this new reality that we're working with around transportation. But I'd love to finish with what I call rapid fire. So I'm going to give you a question or a statement, and I just love your immediate thoughts, about 20 seconds each. You ready?
Sure thing.
The biggest myth about freight brokers you've heard?
That they're all scummy and horrible, greedy people. It's not true. They're barely keeping the lights on. Carriers have the wrong impression a lot of the times that freight brokers are just stacking cash when in reality they're just trying to keep the lights on. I think that's the biggest myth about freight brokers.
If you weren't combating freight fraud, what would you be doing?
I would probably be combating cargo claims, something else freight related. I'm a freight broker at heart, so I'd probably be slinging freight or doing claims or something like that.
And then to bring it home here, what's your favorite summer activity?
I try to play golf when I can. So it's easier said than done with two little kids, but that's my favorite activity.
Totally get it. Totally get it. With that, Michael, thanks for sharing your wisdom with us here. We look forward to continue to see what you and the Highway team do as you battle freight fraud. Cheers.
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks for watching. Follow us at dynamo.vc for all the latest episodes. We'll see you next time.